But I'm actually amazed at Google Scholar and the way in which Google recommends scholars to me and recommends research to me that I genuinely did not know of previously. But it's often I'm just like, wow, that's awesome. That's totally cool, Google. I'm really curious to hear more. So Google recently accomplished this via a researcher named Samuel Woolley. And I'm kind of curious, Sharita, if you've encountered Samuel Woolley before. I suspect some of our Metaviews members have, but I had not, and I was blown away. And that's why I'm sort of calling this segment Automating Power. Because Automating Power is one of Sam's second highest cited papers, and it's about social bot interference in global politics. His most cited paper, Automation, Algorithms in Politics, sort of looks at computational propaganda and autonomous agents. But this was sort of research that he was doing about 4 years ago, basically in the lead up to the Trump election and looking at the kind of accusations of electoral interference that were really coming up around the time. But I mean, a lot of this is really fascinating subjects that tie into a lot of the active persistent threads that we talk about, here on Metaviews. So let's take a quick look at his paper, Automating Power. And I will increase the font here. Social bot interference in global politics. Over the last several years, political actors worldwide have begun harnessing the digital power of social bots. Software programs designed to mimic human social media users on platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and Reddit. Increasingly, politicians, militaries, and government contracted firms use these automated actors in online attempts to manipulate public opinion and disrupt organizational communication. Politicized social bots, here political bots, are used to massively boost politicians' follower levels on social media sites in an attempt to generate false impressions of popularity. They are programmed to actively and automatically flood news streams with spam during political crises, elections, and conflicts in order to interrupt the efforts of activists and political dissidents who publicize and organize online. Which is an interesting contrast that this guy's trying to sort of suggest that some people are legitimate, but other people are not. But we'll elaborate on that in a moment. They are used by regimes to send out sophisticated computational propaganda. This paper conducts a content analysis of available media articles on political bots in order to build an event data set of global political bot deployment that codes for usage, capability, and history. This information is then analyzed, generating a global outline of this phenomena. This outline seeks to explain the variety of political bot-oriented strategies and presents details crucial to building understandings of these automated software actors in the humanities, computers, and social science and computer sciences. I mean, it's interesting to read that abstract kind of 5 years later and get a sense of how the field has evolved, how our understanding of bots has evolved. Because what I feel is problematic about that paper is the way in which it tries to draw a moral distinction between a human commenter and a non-human commenter. And I say this in the sense that, we've always talked about how there is no robots, there is no humans, we're all cyborgs now. And I think there is a legitimate role for people to use automated tools as part of their political participation, as part of the expression of their political ideals. And I kind of feel that the frame from 5 years ago, we'll see if Sam has revised that frame by looking at more of his contemporary research. But I kind of feel that by demonizing bots as separate from humans is flawed to begin with. Now, I think it is interesting to look at automating power and the way in which regimes and powerful organizations can use bots as a weapon and can use them as a way to automate their expression or their projection of power. But I don't entirely see what's wrong with other people doing that as well, whether individuals or civil society groups or activists. So his framing that activists who don't use that are somehow legitimate, but activists who would use that are legitimate, I think that's problematic, and I'm not sure that flies. So I'm Let's take a moment here to resort. So before we resort by year, let's get a quick sense of some of his other highly cited works. Computational propaganda worldwide, political communication, computational propaganda, autonomous agents. So it looks a lot of this is like textbook stuff on how bots have been used and how people use bots. I mean, Merle, this is also why I want you to sort of learn more about programmatic advertising, because I think there's definitely some opportunities here in terms of using this for non-advertising but more political purposes. But let's resort. Let's look at Sam's more recent articles to see if he's adapted his frame. Probabilistic social learning improves the public's detection of misinformation. Ooh, that's interesting. We'll come to that in a moment. Bots and computational propaganda, automation for communication and control. Computational propaganda and the news, from hanging out to figuring it out. That seems interesting. All right, The Reality Game. Oh, that's his latest book. Okay, we'll look at that in a moment. Demand for Deceit, how the way we think drives disinformation. I'm not sure this guy has evolved much. I mean, it's unfortunate, but let's look at his first link and let's check out the abstract here. The digital spread of misinformation is one of the leading threats to democracy, public health, and the global economy. Popular strategies for mitigating misinformation include crowdsourcing, machine learning, and media literacy programs that require social media users to classify news in binary terms as either true or false. However, research on peer influence suggests that framing decisions in binary terms can amplify judgment errors and limit social learning, whereas framing decisions in probabilistic terms can reliably improve judgments. Oh, I like this. I like moving past the binary. This makes a lot of sense. In this pre-registered experiment, we compare online peer networks that collaboratively evaluate the veracity of news by communicating either binary or probabilistic judgments. Exchanging probabilistic estimates of news veracity substantially improved individual and group judgments with the effect of eliminating polarization in news evaluation. By contrast, exchanging binary classifications reduced social learning and entrenched polarization. The benefits of probabilistic social learning are robust to participants' education, gender, race, religion, and partisanship. Well, that's fascinating. And, that does make me sort of get a sense that his thinking has evolved over the last little while. And instead of seeing these things as binary, they're recognizing a probabilistic, which is a more quantum approach to helping people make up their own mind. So, this gives me reason that his previous binaries are being replaced by a more probabilistic or spectrum approach to thinking, which I think makes more sense when looking at the role of bots in politics. Merlichon posted, I feel like the notion of bots has negative connotations, but they can be used for good if so done responsibly. Absolutely. And that's where we're big fans of our friends Electrical Longboard, and the way in which they're using bots to foster social inclusion and participation. So that does give me room for optimism in terms of Sam Woolley not being too binary in terms of a potential thinker. I mean, I'm glad that we've profiled him today on the show, because I am going to click the follow. So I'll go to his Twitter. Let's Google him here, Samuel. I think I may have already followed him on Twitter, but no, I haven't. So let's add him on Twitter. Looks like he's tweeting relatively frequently, so it'll be interesting for him to influence our future topics and interests. I mean, part of my goal really in sort of focusing on some research every week is that sort of helps build our sources for the show moving forward and connect us with some of the interesting researchers who are doing work when it comes to, technology in general. And I was interested by Sam Woolley's notion of automating power, although I do feel that his concept of automating power is still a little narrow. So we'll have to revisit it in a future issue in terms of trying to anticipate whether, as Murley was sort of suggesting, that whether the automation of power could be used for good. I like to think as a citizen, I'd love to have a bot advocating on my behalf and ensure that that bot was always, scouring for issues, looking for politicians I should support, or conversely, trolling politicians I don't like, of, fighting the good fight in the chat rooms of the world on my behalf because I'm busy sleeping or I'm busy making food or working on the farm. So I think it's too simplistic to suggest that automating power is inherently a bad thing, but that instead we should be thinking about automating power within the context of checks and balances. That if power is going to be automated, then that automation needs to have some oversight, that automation needs to serve democracy, which is why I felt it was a natural follow-up to our earlier conversation around AI weapons and automated weaponry and killer robots as something that we all really need to pay